Imagine walking into a classroom where the hum of fluorescent lights mixes with the scraping of chairs and the faint smell of chalk dust. You step in, hoping for answers, for opportunity, for a chance to be seen. But the path ahead is littered with invisible barriers. This is Jada's world. 17 years old, a high school senior, standing before a single broken microscope in her AP chemistry lab. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, we want to thank you for your support, love, and kindness. We wouldn't have come this far without you. Subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue to bring you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. I can still see it in my mind. Jada's fingers hovering over cracked lens, her eyes tracing the outlines of molecules she would never get to observe firsthand. "I study by imagination," she whispered, a soft defiance in her voice. "Because we can't do the experiments." It's the kind of sentence that makes you stop. Not because it's extraordinary, but because it shouldn't have to exist at all. And yet, here it is. Her story isn't just hers. It's a reflection of the millions of students across America whose dreams are filtered, restricted, and weighed down by a system that claims equality but delivers disparity. America's educational system was forged in the fires of inequality. During the Jim Crow era, black children learned in rundown buildings, often without heat, without books, but never without hope. I remember reading about Thurgood Marshall arguing in courtrooms, fighting for a principle that children like Jada could access the same quality of education as anyone else. And then there were the Little Rock Nine, brave students walking hallways lined with hate, facing mobs and threats, all to claim a right that had been denied. Decades later, their struggle echoes still. Desegregation was promised, but never fully delivered. Schools in predominantly black neighborhoods today receive, on average, $23 billion less in funding than those in white districts. Teachers like Ms. Robinson in Jada's school often buy classroom supplies out of their own pockets. Classrooms overflow. Technology breaks and stays broken. These aren't just numbers. They are missed experiments, missed scholarships, and dreams deferred. Take Malik, a sophomore from Georgia. Bright, curious, asking questions others hesitate to. He opened his history textbook one morning and frowned. No black inventors listed. He raised his hand, asked politely, "Why are there none of our stories here?" The answer came swift and cold. "Be quiet. That's not part of the curriculum." Detention followed, not because Malik misbehaved, but because he dared to question what he was being fed. And then there's Aaliyah, top of her class, her GPA gleaming, her college applications ready. She applied for a magnet program, hoping for a broader chance to learn. Her acceptance? Denied. "District funds won't allow your transfer," the counselor said. She cried. Not from failure, not from lack of effort, but from the bitter truth that her excellence was not enough to break the invisible chains of funding inequality. Every name you hear, every story you read, echoes across city streets and state lines. Thousands of voices muted, dreams deferred, brilliance unseen. These are not isolated incidents. They're the blueprint of a system built to filter rather than foster. Walking down the hallways of Jada's school, you feel the weight of invisible barriers. The peeling paint, the flickering lights, the overcrowded classrooms. They whisper the truth. Some students are expected to do more with less, and some never even get the chance. Testing is another battlefield. Standardized tests, meant to measure intelligence, often reward cultural familiarity over actual skill. A student who doesn't see themselves reflected in the material, who has never been exposed to certain words, histories, or perspectives, is immediately behind. Representation isn't a luxury. It's proof of possibility. When a child never sees heroes who look like them, they begin to believe intelligence has a face that isn't theirs. And mentorship? It suffers quietly, too. Staff and leadership rarely reflect the students they serve, not from lack of care, but from lack of understanding. Guidance that could light a path is often missing. These cracks allow potential to slip away without notice, without protest, without news coverage. But amidst the struggle, hope is rising. Grassroots programs push back against the system. Mentorship programs like my brother's keeper match students with leaders who understand the journey. Schools are rewriting curricula to include perspectives that were once erased, teaching history and humanity. Real reform starts when communities demand transparency, when teachers embrace inclusion as purpose, not policy. Change doesn't begin in Washington. It begins in classrooms, one student at a time. The injustice escalates daily. Students like Jada, Malik, and Aaliyah navigate corridors and classrooms like minefields. Every assignment, every opportunity, every exam, a reminder that effort alone may not be enough. The tension is palpable. When brilliant minds are met with insufficient resources, it creates an emotional pressure cooker. Anxiety builds, dreams shrink, and hope teeters on the edge. Yet these students continue, quietly resisting. Jada sketches molecules in her notebook, imagining reactions that the lab cannot produce. Malik debates quietly with peers about inventors erased from history, refusing to internalize silence. Aaliyah studies the odds and plans, refusing to let a single system block her path entirely. Their persistence is defiance. Their everyday resilience, a quiet rebellion against inequity. This is systemic racism in education. Subtle, pervasive, almost invisible, yet devastating in its effects. It survives not through overt cruelty, but through quiet design. Underfunded schools, biased tests, partial histories, invisible mentorship gaps. And every statistic, every dollar less, every denied transfer, it is deliberate consequence, not accident. The stories of Jada, Malik, and Aaliyah are the heartbeat behind the numbers. They remind us that education is not a neutral space. It is a reflection of society itself. If we ignore these cracks, we accept a system rigged against the most vulnerable. But if we see them, if we act, if we fight, change is possible. And it begins here, in these hallways, classrooms, and minds. The day it all began to shift started quietly, almost imperceptibly. Jada walked into her classroom, notebook clutched tight, molecules still scribbled in the margins. But this time, she wasn't imagining reactions alone. Across town, Malik had collected petitions and testimonies from his peers about the gaps in their history curriculum. And Aaliyah had connected with parents from other schools, gathering evidence of systemic funding disparities. It started as a whisper, a murmur. Students sharing stories, comparing experiences, realizing that their struggles weren't isolated. Jada looked around her lab and finally spoke up during class. "We need more microscopes," she said, voice steady. "We need labs we can actually use." The teacher paused, caught off guard, but the words didn't die there. They spread. Meetings were requested. Administrators took notes. The cracks in the system were finally being exposed by the very students it tried to silence. Malik's voice rose louder than ever in the school board meeting. "We are not asking for handouts. We are asking for fairness. Our textbooks erase us. Our funding ignores us. We are here, we exist, and our education deserves attention." His peers murmured assent. Parents nodded. Aaliyah stood beside him, her documents in hand, tears brimming but determination unwavering. She read aloud the statistics they had gathered. Classrooms overflowing, budgets slashed, opportunities withheld, all tied directly to zip codes, race, and systemic neglect. And then the domino effect began. Local reporters picked up the story. Social media amplified it. Video clips of overcrowded classrooms, broken lab equipment, and students' heartfelt testimonies went viral. The narrative couldn't be ignored. Administrators who had previously dismissed complaints suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. Statements of budget limitations and district policy no longer sufficed. The public saw the system for what it was: rigged, unequal, and failing the very students it claimed to serve. The public humiliation was swift and undeniable. School board officials scrambled to justify decades of inequity. Meetings were live-streamed. Parents, educators, and students demanded accountability. News outlets highlighted the broken microscopes in Jada's lab, the erased inventors in Malik's textbooks, and the denied magnet school transfer for Aaliyah. The stories that once lived in whispers were now headlines, impossible to ignore. But the real power reversal came not in outrage alone, but in tangible action. Funding was reallocated to schools that had long been deprived. New microscopes arrived in Jada's lab. Malik's school adopted a revised, inclusive curriculum that recognized black inventors and scientists. Aaliyah was accepted into a new magnet program with full access to resources and mentorship opportunities. The student's brilliance, once filtered and suppressed, finally found a path to flourish. Yet the moral resolution extended beyond immediate victories. The story resonated across districts, inspiring other students and communities to examine their own schools, funding models and curricula. Grassroots programs like My Brother's Keeper expanded. Equity-focused initiatives gained momentum. Teachers and administrators were trained to recognize bias, to understand how structural inequities affected daily classroom experiences, and actively mentor students who had previously been overlooked. At the same time, the story reinforced an essential lesson. Education cannot be separated from society. When systemic inequities are challenged in classrooms, the ripple effect touches neighborhoods, communities, and future generations. Jada, Malik, and Aaliyah's victories were personal, but also profoundly collective. They proved that even the most entrenched systems could be disrupted when voices refused to be silenced. The aftersting echo lingered. The fight wasn't over. The systemic issues that had persisted for generations could not be erased overnight. But the spark had been lit, and it was spreading. Students who had once believed their potential was limited by their zip codes began to see possibility. Parents who had felt powerless learned that collective action could force accountability. Communities understood that equity was not a theoretical concept, but a measurable, actionable necessity. Change, however incremental, had taken root. Classrooms once dismissed as underfunded were now spaces of innovation, curiosity, and inclusion. The student stories became case studies, taught in schools to illuminate the human consequences of policy decisions. Their experiences weren't just warnings. They were blueprints for how to fight, advocate, and demand more. As Jada peered into a new microscope, her smile no longer tempered by imagination alone, she realized the fight for equity wasn't about one experiment or one grade. It was about claiming space, demanding fairness, and refusing to accept that her zip code defined her potential. Malik, flipping through his now inclusive history textbook, felt a pride that transcended detention slips and hallway whispers. Aaliyah, walking into her new magnet program, carried not just her own ambitions, but the weight of every student who had been told no before her. And for those watching, the moral was clear. Education isn't broken. It has been built this way, but it can be rebuilt. Each action, attending school board meetings, volunteering as a mentor, advocating for transparency, and amplifying student voices, contributes to the slow but unstoppable arc of justice. This story, like the system exposes, is imperfect but alive. The hope that grows from it is patient and persistent. Every step toward equity reshapes the world our children inherit. Education should not measure privilege. It should multiply potential. And when communities demand fairness in classrooms, fairness begins to ripple outward, transforming society itself. So let this not be just another story we tell. Let it be the story we continue to write together. Jada, Malik, and Aaliyah are no longer just statistics. They are living proof that even the most rigged systems can be challenged, that voices united can force change, and that hope, once ignited, can illuminate the path for countless others. The classrooms remain, the hallways echo, but now with possibility. Students stand taller, teachers listen harder, and the fight for equitable education marches on. One action, one voice, one victory at a time. Education isn't broken. It's been built this way. Let's rebuild it together.